So what is all this talk about regenerative agriculture? You know, I would have never guessed, back years ago, John Cherry reached out to me and asked me if I would consider coming and speaking at Groundswell. And unfortunately, he's asked me several times. I've had to say no simply because my schedule tends to fill up. But I have watched this grow and grow over here over the past 8+ years. And after last year's advance, I reached out to him and I said, John, whether you want me or not, I'm coming next year, God willing. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here. So I understand. I saw the hands that were raised, and many of you said that you've read my book. Thank you for that. It was the first book I wrote. To be honest with you, I'm not a very smart businessman. I signed a deal where I make a whopping 76 cents a copy, so it takes a lot of copies. But you heard my story, but most of you who haven't read it wouldn't know that I'm from North Dakota, and when many people think of North Dakota, this is what they think of, that well, I'm out on the tundra. And no, that's not a herd of muskox. That's actually our cow-calf pairs out grazing at 40 degrees Celsius below zero, okay? And they do just fine. There's a close-up of what they were grazing. And people find that hard to believe that part of regenerative agriculture is how do we get back to nature. And yet here they are trying to impose their will on nature, keeping cattle and other livestock confined. I'm going to put this challenge out there. If you think your animals should be confined, in the winter, go open a gate. See where they want to go. I guarantee you that they'll want to go out and find what they really prefer to do, and that is to graze. So, I learned how to farm from my father-in-law, who practiced very conventionally. Our farm back in North Dakota is about 6,000 acres. Of that, there's about 2,000 acres of arable land, another 4,000 acres of perennials. My father-in-law farmed what I consider very conventional. Half summer fallow, half crop, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, monoculture production. That's how I learned to farm, because I was born and raised in the city. I married into this, took a real interest in agriculture, but I couldn't quite understand some of the things he was doing. One of the things he loved to do was to till. This is my father-in-law and his beloved disc. He practiced what I call recreational tillage. Some days he just went out, tilled for the sake of tilling. True story. So when he retired, he had an auction sale, sold all his equipment except that tractor, and he went and bought a brand new disc, and then he went and disced for the neighbors for free. Now, I wonder with today's fuel prices if he'd still continue to do that. I kind of don't think so. Now, I got to fast forward a little bit. When my father-in-law, he saw me going down the regenerative path, saw me go no-till, was not a believer. Until the final year he was alive, I was combining 200 bushel maize off dryland farming on 13 inches of moisture. Then I knew I finally had him. He went and asked my wife to take a picture of him and my son standing in that cornfield as it was being combined. I knew I finally had him. A month later, unfortunately, he passed away. And ironically, what did Gabe get in his will? Not the tractor, okay? He gave me that disc, you know? That was his way of saying, Gabe, you're doing good, but maybe you just might want to till a little bit. The disc lasted 5 days, and it was sold. 1994, I sold all my tillage equipment, went 100% zero-till. And I originally did that to save time and moisture, okay? So I was committed. I had a friend who had told me, Gabe, if you're going to go no-till, sell your tillage equipment. Then you can't go back. And I did that. 1994 was a good year. We had a bumper crop. I thought, man, I got this down. Life is easy. 1995 came along, and the day before I was going to start combining 1,200 acres of spring wheat, we lost 100% of our crop to hail. Now, I didn't have any crop insurance. My father-in-law had farmed there 35 years. only had hail twice to a very small extent. Well, that was pretty difficult to go through, losing your entire cash crop, but I tell you, we managed. Next spring comes, the banker, okay, he'll borrow me more money. 1996, we lost 100% of our crop to hail again. So things are getting pretty tough. My wife and I took off-farm jobs. We had payments to make. I was fortunate in that I had a contract for deed on the land with my in-laws. I was pretty sure they weren't going to foreclose on me. But the bank wasn't willing to loan me money anymore. 1997 came along, and I was starting to diversify the crop rotation because, hey, I can't put all my eggs in one basket. I started growing peas, some fall biennials, started to diversify a little bit. 1997 came along, and it was an extreme drought. Nobody harvested an acre in our area. Now, we're in an area, get about 17 to 18 total inches of precipitation. However, of that, about a third of it is from the snow we get. We'll tend to get about 75, 80 inches of snow a year. And if we don't get snow, it's not good for the next year's crop. So after 1997, things were looking really bleak. I was questioning my choice of professions. My wife was questioning her choice of husbands. But in saying that, last month we celebrated our 44th anniversary, so I think it worked out okay. Anyway, yeah, thank you. 1998 rolls around, and that is an actual photo that we took from our ranch, and you can about guess what that meant. So, yeah, we lost 80% of our crop to hail that year. So 4 years, no crop income. I had livestock. I began to enjoy livestock even more because they tended to live through the hailstorm. But I tell you what, 4 years, things were looking a little dire. Piggy bank was hurting. We were $1.5 million US in debt, which was a lot of money back in 1998. It still is today. So how do I get out of debt? Bank wasn't going to borrow me money, as I said. My neighbors were all just waiting. They just wanted to buy the land. But I tell you what, I was beginning to see some changes occurring. We had never had an earthworm in our field. I could never go fishing. My father-in-law dissed those earthworms to death. There was no earthworms in the fields. We were starting to see some. I was seeing pollinators and other beneficial insects show up. Birds were becoming more and more numerous. We were starting to see the neotropicals migrate in. Wildlife was becoming much more abundant. Water was starting to infiltrate into our soils. I remember learning from my father-in-law. Spring of the year, we'd be out there disking the fields, and he'd say, Gabe, we're just trying to dry the fields out so we can get in and seed. But then by July, we were on our knees praying for rain. It didn't make sense to me. Now, all of a sudden, I started to see water infiltrate into the soil. And my soils were beginning to look like chocolate cake. They were actually changing color. And this occurred from those 4 years. I really then began to realize that I had degraded my ecosystem. And nature, the natural succession process was working, and we were starting to get health back into the system. This is a photo, my soil's there. You can guess which ones are mine and which ones are my neighbors. Now, I'm not going to say which neighbor just in case they got somebody in the room here, but there was a real difference. And this is one of the things I want to impress on you about regenerative agriculture. People think, oh, it takes decades to make a difference. No, it doesn't. The change can occur very rapidly if we open our eyes and observe. It was during that time that I heard a rancher from Alberta, Canada, make this statement when I was at a conference. And this statement, along with those 4 disaster years, really shaped my life. He said this: if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things, a piece of equipment, an input, etc. But if you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. And that's the challenge I want to put forward for you today. Change the way you see things. Now, I've been blessed in that I get to travel all over the world. I'm on hundreds of farms every year. And I tell you what, as long as there's a little bit of soil, we can move that piece of land down the regenerative path. This is not rocket science. It's certainly not difficult. A city kid from North Dakota can kind of figure things out. Every one of you can also. I really realized that my management had been degrading the soil. I was not being a good steward of the land. It was then that I realized that I needed to become a student again. Realize I have several college degrees, but you know what? Never once in any of those soil classes and in any of those agronomy classes did they teach me how a soil aggregate was formed, how biology drives the natural nutrient cycle. I needed to unlearn and relearn. You see, that's the most difficult thing we have to do to change the production system. Farmers cannot implement what they do not understand. How many people really understand how a soil aggregate is formed? Yet your profitability depends on that. The conventional agriculture model is the road to degradation. My father-in-law disking those soils year after year, multiple times. Do you realize that the thickness of a sheet of paper is the equivalent of 1 ton of topsoil per acre? Look at this photo. See that soil blowing? How many tons of topsoil are being lost just from that one tillage pass? We have to realize, no matter where we go all over the world, 30 to 75% of the organic carbon that was once in our soils is now in the atmosphere. That's our children's future. That's our health. That's the nutrient density of the food we produce. That's no longer there. Take a look at this photo, and I know many of you have seen this. We've been using it for years. A farmer had a forested area. They cleared that forested area. It was 4.3% soil organic matter. They farmed it with tillage, herbicides, conventional practices, soybeans for 17 years. 62.8% loss in soil organic matter. That's the same soil. The only difference is the management. I know many people say, but Gabe, I'm a no-tiller. I'm already regenerative. I'll call BS on that. This photo here I dug out from a neighbor's field. Different neighbor than the last one. I talk about my neighbors routinely and try and rotate through them. This is 12 years of no-till. Take a look at that soil. How much water is going to infiltrate in there? Right? How much biology is in there? How much diversity is in there? How much carbon's being stored in there? You see, no-till isn't enough either. That's but a small piece of the puzzle. The conventional road to degradation has many, many consequences for others. We see a significant degradation in water quality. Flooding. You know, I don't know here how it is here in the UK, but in the States, every spring along the major waterways, there's major flooding issues. That causes massive economic loss to those communities, to individuals. What's the current production model doing to our small towns? We're seeing a lot of the profitability that is in agriculture go to very, very large producers and being exported to large agribusiness. And no, I'm not anti-large agribusiness, but I believe we need to keep the wealth in the farmers' pockets and in our rural communities. And finally, what's it doing to human health? And I'm going to talk a lot more about that one. There is a better way, though, and that way is regeneration. That's what I'd like to talk to you about. Regeneration isn't a practice, it's a mindset. And Your Highness talked about that, how we need to change our minds, change the way you see things. Regeneration means stewarding life, not extracting from it. Unfortunately, for the past 75 plus years, that's what we've been doing. We've been extracting the health of our soils, we've been extracting the wealth out of our rural communities, and we've been extracting our own health. It's how we grow food, treat animals, educate our children, run companies, and define success. When we regenerate soils, we regenerate people, communities, and natural ecosystems. That's the kind of thinking that we need to scale. That's why it's so exciting for me to be here at Groundswell and see so many people want to take on this challenge. And when we go home and look in the mirror, we have to realize that challenge starts with each and every one of us. That's the kind of thinking that we need to scale, not more bureaucratic compliance checklists and subsidies. Sorry, I just had to get that one in there. We need to go beyond sustainability. I do not like the word sustainable. Why do we want to sustain a degraded resource? That makes no sense. And let me tell you what, every single farm I've been on all over the world, including my own, is degraded. We can't stand for that. We need to move beyond that. We need to learn how to observe again and then adapt according to our observations. You know, I have many friends in the farming community. Their idea of farming is to get a recipe card from the agronomy center, have them apply what nutrients the agronomist says, come out and spray what chemical the agronomist says. They don't observe and they don't adapt. One of the hardest challenges we have as we take people down to help them on their regenerative journey is to teach them how to observe again. Our ancestors had that keen power of observation. We've lost that, right? We need to get away from yield per acre. Tell you a little story. So one year, the national champion corn grower, or maize grower, from the United States came to Bismarck. So, of course, I had to go listen to him. And I'm sitting there listening to him, and he's reeling off just slide after slide of all these inputs he put into this corn crop. And, you know, this maize was selling for about $3.50 a bushel, same price it's been for the last 40 years, unless there's a drought. And at the end of the program, he had a Q&A session. So I stood in line at the microphone, and I asked him this simple question. And I don't remember his exact yield. It was around 500 bushels an acre. And I stood up and I said, you know, one thing, you showed us your inputs, you showed us your yield. I want to know your profit. What did it cost you to produce a bushel of that corn? And he stood up there, and to his credit, he told us. He said, just over $7 a bushel. Me, having the big mouth I do, I said, I have no desire to learn how to lose money. And I turned and walked away, you know? But we are so focused on yield in the current production model, we sacrifice profit. I will take profit over yield any day. Because I tell you what, when you were as broke as I was, profit means something, you know? I can stay on the land with profit. I can't stay on the land with simply yield. We need to quit fighting nature. We need to learn how to mimic nature. We need to really start thinking about how do we grow more life on our operation. I tell people for years I used to wake up every morning trying to decide what I was going to kill that day. Was it going to be a weed, a pest, a fungal disease? I was going to kill something. Now I wake up every morning, how do I get more life on our farm? Let me tell you what, it's a lot more enjoyable and a lot more profitable working with life rather than death. Let me tell you just briefly what regenerative agriculture isn't. It is not prescriptive. You're not going to get a recipe card for regenerative agriculture, right? It isn't about synthetic inputs or the latest, greatest technologies. Now, I am not standing here to tell you you should drop all synthetic inputs and you should not look at the greatest technologies. There's a lot of technologies out at this event that are useful, okay? But just realize That's just something we can add on to enhance what we're doing. We first have to get back to mimicking nature. Regenerative agriculture isn't about yields, okay? It's about profit. It isn't about one size fits all. One of the principles of regenerative agriculture is that of context, and each one of our contexts is different. The other thing, regenerative agriculture isn't easy. It can be a rough road, but it's a very rewarding and profitable road. I like to define regenerative agriculture as this. It's farming in synchrony with nature to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, beginning with all life in the soil, moving to all life above the soil. And that life above the soil includes us. And we've talked about it a lot today as I've walked around this conference, is that regenerative agriculture really lights a fire under you and makes farming fun again. It's very, very rewarding mentally. Here's what we're focused on in regenerative agriculture: the 4 ecosystem processes, the energy cycle, the natural mineral cycle, the water cycle, and biodiversity. I'm going to talk a bit about the energy cycle, but I want to mention one thing about the mineral cycle that I think is really important. So we're actually consulting on over 36 million acres of crop and pasture land in North America, the UK, and Ireland. We have done soil samples for what's called a total nutrient extraction. In other words, it tells us the amount of nutrients that are in the soil to a 1-foot depth, about that depth. We have not tested a single acre out of 36 million that's lacking in any nutrient for profitable crop production. In fact, it's absolutely amazing the quantity of nutrients we're finding. See, most of the soil tests you have done by your agronomist, they only tell you the inorganic fraction of nutrients, what's available the day that sample was taken. What they're not telling you is this whole pool of organic nutrients that's tied up in biology, dying, decaying plant material, soil organic matter, etc. That pool, if you have correct biology in your soil, can be made available. This is one of the ways, as we take people on their regenerative journey, that they're able to significantly increase their profitability very rapidly, because they focus on life in the soil. Also, biodiversity, extremely important. Now, how do we get to those and enhance those 4 ecosystem processes? It's by using these 6 principles. And these are universal. Gabe Brown's got a big mouth, in case you haven't noticed, and I'm not afraid to say things. Way back in 2012, the toughest group I've ever spoken to was the South Australia No-Till Farmers Association. Group of about 1,800 farmers in South Central Australia. And I could tell about a third the way into my presentation, they were not buying it. So I just stopped everything and I said, look, this isn't my first rodeo. I can read the audience pretty well, and I can tell you think I'm full of it. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm going to bet my farm in North Dakota against any one of yours that I can get it to work on your farm. And I said, but I want to warn you, I'm going to end up owning your farm, because this will work absolutely anywhere in the world where there's soil, because it's just the natural 4 ecosystem processes driven by these 6 principles. The first principle is that of context. Every one of us here has a different context. We have a little bit different environment, a little bit different growing season. Our financial context may be different. Our family context may be different. So you have to take that into account, okay? The other 5 principles have to do with growing things. Number 1, do not disturb. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not standing here telling you you can't do any tillage. I'm just telling you to reduce or minimize that tillage, reduce and minimize your synthetic inputs, whether they're fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides. Yes, I'm going to be honest, I would love for you to eliminate all of those, okay? But you can't do it overnight. You'll have a wreck. Do it at your own pace, what fits your context. The third principle is cover the soil. If you see bare soil anywhere on your farm, you're losing the battle. You're going to have wind erosion, you're going to have water erosion, temperatures are going to heat up, you're going to negatively affect soil biology, you're not going to have the food there for that soil biology, you're behind the 8 ball. You've got to cover the soil. The fourth principle is that of diversity. We have to enhance diversity. How many species of plants are on your farm? Any idea? Have you documented it? You know, it's pretty easy with the phone. Take a picture. There's apps. Document it. We're up to 174 species on our ranch now. Okay? However, if you read anything about U.S. history, Lewis and Clark, when they came through North Dakota, they documented over 300 species. I've got a long way to go. And I look at it as a challenge, but we're getting there. Okay? Living root. Keep a living root in the soil for as long as possible throughout the year. I'm going to talk about collecting solar energy here in a minute. But what do we see on arable land today? People grow a cash crop, they harvest that cash crop, nothing else is growing. You have to keep a diverse living community in that soil at all times to feed that soil biology, capture that free solar energy. That's where money comes from. And the sixth principle is that of animal integration, where appropriate. And I tell people, I was asked that question 3 times this morning, okay? I'm an arable farmer, do I need to get livestock? And I answer them, no, that's up to you and your context. But make no mistake about it, ecosystems do not function properly without animals and insects. Your soil health will never advance as far as it could if you do not add livestock. You need to add livestock where appropriate. The principles and practices breathe life into our soil, into our farms, and into our future. We have to realize that every decision we make has either positive or negative compounding and cascading effects. If we go out there and apply that synthetic fertilizer, what's the negative cascading effect to communities downstream if that leaves our land? If we don't plant a cover crop to hold those nutrients in place, what's the negative cascading effect? If we move from a tilled system to a no-till system, what's the positive compounding effect, right? We have to take that into account for every single decision we make on our farm. We have to think about diversity. Diversity, diversity, diversity. We talk about birds and the importance, and I talked about how those 4 years of disaster, I started to notice more birds returning to our farm. Just this past week, we had a gentleman to our farm who is one of these people, he can identify over 500 different birds by sound, okay? In one morning, he documented 105 species of birds on our farm in a 3-hour period, okay? How about insects? How many insects do you see? And you know, I used to have the mindset that every insect is a pest. Till I met Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and he taught me that for every insect species that's a pest, there's over 1,700 species that are either beneficial or they're indifferent. They're not going to help you or hurt you, but they are going to be food for some, including all those birds. So when you're out there spraying for a pest and you're killing all insects, what's the negative cascading effect of that? We have to realize the decisions that we make. And they affect much more than just our animals. They affect all insects. I want to talk just a little bit about the power of sunlight. I think this is the most underused free resource that we have. This is where our income as farmers comes from. How much sunlight are you capturing on your farm? Do you walk out in the field? What % of sunlight is hitting the soil surface? what percent is being intercepted by the leaf of a living plant. Because it's only through that that we can generate true new wealth. That's wealth that we didn't have, but we capture that sunlight, put it through a living plant, and preferably biodiverse community of plants. Take a look at this photo. How many different leaf sizes and shapes do you see there? How much sunlight's going to hit the soil surface? It should be your goal as a farmer to intercept as much as you possibly can. If it's hitting the soil, don't come to me saying you can't make money farming. You're giving up income if it hits the soil. What happens then once that goes into that plant? All these carbon compounds and amino acids and proteins are all produced, and a part of them varies from 10% to 50% are translocated to the roots, and that's the actual photo of the root tip of a plant exuding those root exudates out into the soil. And why is it doing that? It's doing that, of course, to feed biology. That's a water bear. Biology lives in and on thin films of water in the pore spaces between soil aggregates. How many of us as farmers know how a soil aggregate is formed? That soil aggregate will only last approximately 4 weeks. You better be forming new ones. Actual true story, another thing I did. Once I learned about this, I wrote a letter to the dean of the university where I'd gone to college, and I demanded my money back because they didn't teach me these basic principles. We need to understand how a soil aggregate is formed. These are new soil aggregates being formed along a millet root. So the plant exudes the root exudates, biology comes, feeds on those carbon compounds of the root exudates, biology secretes sticky substance along with mycorrhizal fungi that secrete glomalin. That's the formation of new aggregates. Once you do that, then, you can start building soil. Here's a photo from Sandringham Estate. Look at the aggregates, and that's pretty sandy soil. That's pretty impressive, right? They're building soil aggregates, providing the home and habitat for biology. They're going to be able to infiltrate more water. Then, because of the carbon compounds, they're going to hold on to that water. Now, why do we need diversity? This chart shows you the influence of functional diversity on plant biomass. So you have plant biomass on the left axis, species diversity on the bottom. Take a look at that. Now, what do we do in conventional agriculture today, right? We grow a monoculture. Are we going to produce the most biomass, intercept the most sunlight with a monoculture? No, right? People always ask me, well, how many species should be in a cover crop mix? Well, there's a lot of variables there. What are you trying to address, etc.? What's your resource concern? But I tell you one thing, I'd certainly shoot for somewhere around that 7 or 8 species because you're going to have much more biomass production because of it. Same thing holds true for functional diversity. So plant biomass on the left, functional diversity on the bottom. What do we mean by functional diversity? Grasses, forbs, legumes, trees, shrubs. The more functional diversity you have, the more plant biomass you're going to grow. I'm going to say this very honestly, and I've waited till now to say it because I want to make sure nobody had eggs in the audience. I didn't want them thrown at me. But one of the things that I think many in the UK can really concentrate on is I've seen a lot of paddocks that are grazed way too short, okay? And what happens, a lack of diversity, you overgraze, you're trimming the roots on those plants over and over again where you don't have aggregation to depth. You're not accessing nutrients deeper in the soil profile. What you need to ask yourself is, how deep is bedrock at your farm? That's how deep your aggregation should go, okay? If you're a meter plus till you hit bedrock, you better have well-aggregated soils and roots that deep. Otherwise, you're not taking advantage of what's being provided for you. Let me show you these slides to show you the importance of diversity. This is a triticale crop, spring triticale. Looks pretty poor, right? You're not going to bother harvesting that, are you? There's just not enough there to harvest. Now take a look at this. Looks pretty healthy, right? Look at the heads on those triticale. They're full, right? Now you might say, oh, but that's weedy. No, that's really not weeds. Those are covers growing in there. Now here's the amazing photo. They were planted side by side the same day on the same field. The only difference is one's a monoculture, the other is a diverse polyculture. Yet what are we doing in agriculture? We're planting monocultures, correct? I come over here and people talk about their 5 species herbal lay. And I'm going, that's a nice little start, okay? 5 species, it's a start, and I give them credit. But let's really work for 40 or 50 species and get up there to meaningful so we can start harvesting more sunlight, start producing more biomass. This is the way we're integrating it into arable fields, okay? Now, us livestock growers look at that, and we all want to run it through a cow, of course, first, but this is one of our clients in Illinois. Grows a diverse cover crop. The equipment today, you can go right through there. The crop roller is actually on the front of that air seeder. He's rolling and crimping and seeding the next crop all in one pass. No herbicides used. Plus, no synthetic fertility used. It's getting all the nutrients he needs out of that cycling cover crop. That's the future of agriculture, and what you can do then, this diversity grows resiliency. You're going to improve water infiltration significantly. In 1994, when I first started down the no-till path, government agency came out and they did water infiltration tests. We could only infiltrate 1/2 of an inch, in other words, about 25 mils of water per hour, okay? 2 years ago, I had a team of scientists out. We can now infiltrate over 30 inches of water in an hour. Bismarck, North Dakota has never received 30 inches of precipitation in a year, let alone in an hour. So let me ask you this, do we create our own droughts? Also, due to the amount of carbon, for every 1% increase in organic matter, you can hold at least 20,000 more gallons of water per acre. What does that do? That gives you resiliency during a drought, correct? Also, I talked about biology, living in and on those pore spaces between those soil aggregates. Look at the aggregation of that soil in this photo. It's a lot of home for biology, right? As you build that aggregation deeper and deeper into the soil profile, you're going to access more and more nutrients. On our farm, we have not applied a single pound of any synthetic or organic nutrients, with the exception of what drops out of our animals, since 2007. Yet our crop yields are approximately 25% higher than the average in the area, okay? And people say, oh, but you're going to run out of nutrients. And I said, yes, I will. I'll run out when I stop building aggregation all the way to China, okay? I'm not going to run out of nutrients, ever. Ray Archuleta said it best when he said, plant and soil are one. We have to start thinking of that way. We need diverse communities of living plants to drive a healthy soil ecosystem. Now, I know what you're saying, but Gabe, you live 6,700 kilometers from here. It won't work here. Oh, really? This is Elizabeth Buchanan's Blackven farm, UK's first certified regenified farm. Elizabeth is making it work on her farm. Here's Sean Ma's farm, using adaptive multi-paddock grazing. He's moving the animals daily, building tremendous amount of diversity along with healthy soil. Here he's amp grazing sheep, moving them daily. The one thing that I just shake my head over here is how many people just set stock a paddock. I will guarantee you, you're losing species diversity, you're shortening up the roots, negative, negative, negative. Take a look at this. This is on Sean Ma's place. Look at the amount of dung beetles on that manure pad. That was just amazing. I had to put it in this presentation. That's happening right here in your backyard. There's producers doing this. This is on the Halls farm at Barker House. Look at the soil they're building using adaptive grazing practices. Show you this. People think that, oh, I don't have time to go move livestock every day. This is absolutely amazing to me. I saw this for myself. This is a farmer north of me in southern Canada. Seeded an arable field back to a diverse cover crop mix. Okay? He wanted to see if there was a difference doing multiple daily moves or moving once every 2 days. This is the same field at the end of the season. Take a look at that. He changed that soil that much in one growing season. Oh, but I don't have time to move my livestock. Okay, then you don't have time to make a profit and have healthy soil. Okay? Look in the mirror. Here's Leckford Estate. Regenerative orchards, crop diversity using the wild farmed mix. This can be done. Stewart Johnson, your 2023 Soil Farmer of the Year. They're doing it on their farm, both crops and livestock. Show you this photo here. Do you think there's a difference between those two eggs in that skillet? Is there a difference in the nutrient density between those two eggs? One of those is an egg from our ranch, our free-range chickens, and our chickens are truly free-range. Now, during the winter, we do have them in a hoop house. It's a little too cold at -40 for chickens to be free-range outside. But the hoop house has no heat, and they do well. They could get to the UK if they could fly this far. The other egg in that skillet is from a quote-unquote conventional cage-free system. We're doing some work on nutrient density that's really proving out to be exciting. We're looking at regenerative farms, conventional farms, side by side, same soil types, growing the same grain, fruit, vegetable, pastured protein, and then we're testing the end product, whether it be the wheat, whether it be an apple, whether it be beef, an egg in this case. What we're finding, the regenerative farms, 25 to 64% higher in vitamins. Fatty acid profiles, 32 to 239% higher. Oxidative stress markers, this is what helps prevent heart disease, cancer, etc. 28 to 67% lower oxidative stress markers. That's a good thing. The regenerative road to solutions. We get improved farm profit. We get better water and air quality. We increase nutrient density of our foods. We have a much more biodiverse system. We reduce and even eliminate often the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. We regenerate our communities. Work by Dr. Jonathan Lundgren at the Ecdysis Foundation finds regenerative farms 76% greater profitability. If you don't want to go down the regenerative path, then don't complain if you're not making money. And significant increases in carbon measurements. The principles of regenerative agriculture apply in every geographic area, whether it be cropping, arable, or grazing systems. The positive impact on the environment, food, communities, farm families demonstrates real hope that is in healthy soil. So, I challenge all of you here, whether you're a consumer, a business leader, or a farmer, we all need to know how our food is truly grown and raised. And farmers, you're producing food and fiber. It feeds someone's children, right? Should we be spraying those crops? Really? We don't think that gets into our food system? You need to support local regenerative farms. You need to buy regenerative food if you do. We need to support regenerative nonprofits. And if you're a consumer, try growing a regenerative garden, right? Take a look at that photo. These two soil beds were taken less than 3 meters apart. The only difference between the two is management, or as I prefer to call it, stewardship. That's the only difference. And that soil in the background once looked worse than that bed in front. I know that because it was my farm. You can change it through your management. Your farm is a direct reflection of you. If you don't like how it is, that's on you, right? We need to make the most of our regenerative opportunity, okay? We're only on this earth for a very short time. We don't know when our dance is going to end. So because of that, what's your legacy going to be? We can't wait for tomorrow. We need to start working on it today. If you're a consumer, are you supporting farmers who are using these regenerative practices? If you're a business, does your brand hold up to the standards? Right? Or are you just trying to make a quick dollar? People are buying your products. You need to make sure that you're sourcing as a brand regeneratively grown and raised products. So I challenge you today, let's all of us think about our legacy, think about our children and grandchildren to come. What do we want to leave them? You know, we don't own this land. We simply borrow it from future generations, right? Let's each and every one of us here today take a stand and commit to doing what's right. Let's change the production model into one that is truly regenerative for the betterment of ourselves, our families, and future generations. Thank you.